A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. Alright, we are diving into something heavy but incredibly necessary today. Tomorrow is Passover, and honestly, the air feels different this year. Today's prompt from Daniel is about the weight of this specific moment in the Jewish world. We are looking at a landscape where Israel is at war, anti-Semitic incidents globally have hit staggering highs, and that seat at the seder table just feels a lot heavier than usual.
It really does, Corn. Usually we talk about the Exodus as this ancient foundational myth, but this year the tension between bondage and liberation feels visceral. It is not just history, it is a current event. By the way, for those curious about the mechanics of our conversation today, we are being powered by Google Gemini 3 Flash. Herman Poppleberry here, and I have been spending a lot of time looking at the Haggadah through a slightly different lens this week, trying to find where the hope actually lives when the world feels this grim.
It is funny you say that, because as a sloth, my whole brand is basically low energy, high survival, and as a donkey, you're all about the steady trek. We are not exactly the poster animals for a lightning-fast military rescue, or a sudden miraculous geopolitical shift, but maybe that is exactly what we need right now, the slow-motion perspective on liberation. Because, let's be real, the headlines make it feel like we are trapped in a loop of 2024 and 2025, and now here we are in 2026, still facing these massive systemic threats.
That is the thing about the seder. The word seder literally means order. It is a structured response to chaos. When the world outside feels like it's falling apart, we sit down and follow 15 specific steps. It is a metabolic discipline, if you will. You don't just jump to the meal, you don't just skip to the songs. You go through the bitterness, you go through the washing of hands, you go through the breaking of the matzah.
I like that. It is a routine for when you feel like you have no control. But I want to push on that bitterness part. This year, nobody needs to be told to imagine they were slaves in Egypt. Between the hostages still in tunnels and the sheer vitriol we are seeing in cities like Toronto or London, the Mara or bitter herbs on the plate feel a bit redundant. Do we even need to lean into the pain this year? Is there a risk of just being consumed by it?
That is a crucial question. I think the genius of the seder plate is that the bitter herbs are never eaten alone. They are dipped in the karaset, that sweet, nutty paste that represents the mortar the Israelites used to build cities for Pharaoh. The sweetness is literally the thing that makes the bitterness palatable enough to swallow. If we only had the bitterness, we'd choke. If we only had the sweetness, we'd be delusional. The seder forces you to hold both in your mouth at the same time.
So it's a culinary lesson in cognitive dissonance. Everything is terrible, but also, here is a delicious nut and date spread. It sounds a bit like my approach to life, Herman. I move so slowly that I have to be very selective about what I focus on. If I spent all my time worrying about every predator in the forest, I'd never have the metabolic overhead to actually digest my leaves. I have to exist in a state of strategic chill.
Strategic chill is actually a great way to look at the Israelites in the desert. Think about it. They left Egypt in a hurry. Sure, the dough didn't have time to rise, hence the matzah. But then what happened? They spent 40 years wandering. That is not a sprint. That is a multi-generational slow walk. As a donkey, I appreciate that. Donkeys aren't built for the Kentucky Derby. We are built for the long haul, carrying the heavy packs, keeping our footing on the rocky paths of the Sinai.
Right. And who was carrying all those gold vessels and family heirlooms out of Egypt? It wasn't the horses. Horses are for the chariots of the oppressors. It was the donkeys. The humble, stubborn, I will get there when I get there donkey. There is something profoundly hopeful about the donkey's role in the Exodus. It's the realization that liberation requires a pack animal. It requires someone to carry the weight of the past into the future.
Well, not exactly. I shouldn't say that, but you've hit on a vital point. The donkey represents the physical labor of hope. Hope isn't just a feeling, it's a logistics problem. How do we move 1 million people from point A to point B through a wasteland? You do it one hoof print at a time. And as a sloth, your contribution to this mindset is the conservation of spirit. If we react to every single piece of bad news with a total system-wide panic, we burn out. We don't make it to year 40.
I've been thinking about that metabolic discipline. In my world, if you move too fast, you die. Your heart can't handle it. Your digestion fails. Maybe there's a spiritual equivalent to that. This year, there is so much pressure to have the right take, to be constantly outraged, to be perpetually mourning. And while those things are valid, they are energetically expensive. The sloth lesson for Passover 2026 is, conserve your light. Don't let the darkness bait you into burning all your fuel in the first mile of the desert.
That connects to the idea of slow liberation. We often think of the Exodus as the moment the sea split. Bam, freedom. But the Torah tells a different story. It was a series of plagues, a series of negotiations, a series of setbacks. Even after the sea split, they kept complaining about the food. They wanted to go back. They built the golden calf. Liberation is a messy, non-linear process. It's a layer cake of progress and regression.
It's like clearing a forest. You don't just wave a wand. You have to wait for the rot, wait for the new growth. But Herman, let's get into the why of the seder. Why do we bother with the 4 questions this year? Why is this night different? Feels like a punch in the gut when the answer is because we are terrified and grieving. How does a donkey find the energy to keep walking when the pack feels like it's full of lead?
You focus on the structure, the order. When I'm carrying a heavy load up a mountain, I don't look at the summit. I look at the 6 inches of dirt in front of my nose. The seder is designed to keep our eyes on the 6 inches of dirt. Step 1, Kadesh. We sanctify the time. We say, this hour is different than the hour I spent scrolling through news alerts. Step 2, Urkitz. We wash our hands, we acknowledge that we are messy, and we try to find a moment of purity. We don't solve the war in step 2, we just wash our hands.
It's a series of small, manageable wins. I can dig that. It's very sloth-friendly. I can't solve global antisemitism, but I can dip a vegetable in salt water to represent tears. It's a way of externalizing the grief, so it's not just sitting in your chest. You put the tears on the parsley. You eat the tears. You acknowledge them, and then you move to the next step.
And the salt water is another one of those dual symbols. It's the tears of slavery, but it's also the salt of the sea. The same substance that represents our suffering is the substance that eventually paved the way for our escape. There is a chemical reality there. Grief and the path to freedom are made of the same stuff.
That is deep, Herman. A bit too deep for this early in the afternoon, but I'll take it. But what about the unanswered nature of the questions? This year, the Maggid section, the telling of the story, feels incomplete. We know how the Egypt story ends, but we don't know how the current story ends. How do we sit with that uncertainty at the table?
That is actually where the Elijah's cup comes in. We open the door at the end of the night for a prophet who hasn't arrived yet. The Seder ends on an unfinished note. Next year in Jerusalem. Even if you are already in Jerusalem, like Daniel is, the phrase means next year in a Jerusalem that is at peace. It is a recognition that the work is unfinished. The donkey is still walking. The sloth is still hanging on. We are in the middle of the story, not the end.
I think people are afraid of that middle feeling. They want the Dayenu, it would have been enough to feel real. But it's hard to say it would have been enough when so much is still broken. Maybe this year Dayenu isn't a statement of satisfaction, but a statement of endurance. We are still here, and for today that has to be enough.
I love that. It's a metabolic Dayenu. My body processed enough calories to keep me moving today. Dayenu. I didn't give up on hope today. Dayenu. It's lowering the bar to a level where we can actually clear it. If we demand total geopolitical victory before we allow ourselves to feel a moment of Passover joy, we will never feel joy again. We have to find the Dayenu in the small moments of connection at the table.
Okay, so we've got the metabolic discipline of the sloth and the steady trek of the donkey. But I promised a seder speech. And I take my promises seriously, even if I take 3 hours to get out of bed to fulfill them. I've been drafting something in the back of my mind, a way to bridge this gap between the ancient story and the 2026 reality.
I'm genuinely curious to hear this. You usually lead with the jokes, Corn, but I know you've been feeling the weight of the Toronto reports and the tension in Israel just as much as I have.
Yeah, it's been a lot, especially seeing how quickly the world seems to turn on us. It makes you want to just curl into a ball and stay in your tree. But that's not what we do. So, here's what I'm thinking for a ready-to-roll Seder speech. Something anyone can read right after the 4 questions, or maybe before the meal starts.
Go for it. The floor or the branch is yours.
All right, imagine everyone is sitting there, the matzah is uncovered, the wine is poured, and there's that slightly awkward silence because everyone knows what they aren't talking about. You stand up, tap your glass, and you say this: friends, family, and those we wish were here. We just asked why this night is different from all other nights, and if we are being honest, this year, we don't need a Haggadah to tell us why. This night is different because our hearts are heavier. It's different because the world feels louder and less kind. It's different because the narrow place, the Mitzrayim, doesn't feel like an ancient memory. It feels like the morning news. But we are here, and the fact that we are sitting at this table following this seder, this order, is an act of quiet defiance. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors were told they were nothing more than bricks in someone else's wall. They were told their story was over. But they carried their weights, they moved at the pace of hope, and they walked out. They didn't walk out because they were perfect or because they weren't afraid. They walked out because they decided that tomorrow was worth the trek. Tonight, we aren't just remembering a story about Egypt. We are practicing for our own liberation. We are eating the bitter herbs to acknowledge our pain, but we are dipping them in the sweet cheresed to remind ourselves that we are the ones who build the future. So, let's be patient with ourselves tonight. Like the sloth, let's conserve our inner light so it doesn't burn out. Like the donkey, let's commit to the steady path forward, even when the pack is heavy. We don't have all the answers to the questions we ask tonight, but we have each other, we have this order, and we have the stubborn, beautiful tradition of refusing to give up on the dawn. Next year, may we all be truly free.
Wow, Corn, that actually hits home. Hope is a logistics problem. I'm going to be thinking about that for the rest of the night. You captured the tension perfectly, the acknowledgement of the narrow place without letting it have the final word.
Thanks, Herman. I figure if a sloth can find the energy to write a speech, anyone can find the energy to read it. It's about meeting the moment where it is. We can't pretend it's 2019 and everything is normal. But we also can't act like the story ends in the dark. The whole point of the Passover story is that the darkness is just the preamble to the departure.
And that departure is usually preceded by a lot of strategic waiting, which is your specialty. People forget that the Israelites were in Egypt for centuries. There were generations of people who lived and died without seeing the burning bush. Their job was just to keep the spark alive, to keep the memory of who they were intact, so that when the moment finally came, they were ready to move.
That is a terrifying thought, but also a liberating one. It takes the pressure off us to be the generation of the miracle. Maybe our job right now, in 2026, is just to be the generation of the memory, to make sure that the Seder survives, that the questions are still asked, and that the order is maintained. If we do that, we've won.
I mean, I agree completely. That is the repairing of the world, the tikkun olam, in its most basic form. It's not always about a grand gesture. Sometimes it's just about making sure the table is set. It's about the mechanics of repair. You fix the broken world by refusing to let your own traditions break.
It's the metabolic discipline of the Jewish people. We have a very low energy way of surviving high stress environments. We turn inward. We gather around the table. We eat bread that reminds us of poverty, and we drink wine that reminds us of royalty. It's a brilliant survival strategy. It's kept us going longer than the Egyptians, the Romans, or any of the other empires that tried to turn us into bricks.
I think that is a huge takeaway for this year. Don't look for the big answer. Look for the cedar answer. Follow the steps. If you are feeling overwhelmed by the news from Israel or the attacks in the diaspora, refocus on the step you are on. Are you on Kadesh? Then focus on the wine. Are you on Majid? Then focus on the story. Don't try to solve the 15th step when you are only on step 3.
That is actually great advice for life in general. I usually get stuck on step 0, which is get out of bed. But once I'm past that, I'm golden. But seriously, the idea of order as a sanctuary is powerful. When the world is chaotic, the seder is a fortress. It's a 3,000-year-old fortress made of words and symbolic foods.
And it's a fortress that has room for everyone. The wise child, the wicked child, the simple child, and the one who doesn't even know how to ask. This year, I think a lot of us feel like that 4th child. We are so stunned by the state of the world that we don't even know what to ask. We are just there.
And the Haggadah says, ad pitak lo, you open it up for him. You start the conversation for the one who is silenced by grief or confusion. That is what we are doing today, I guess. We are starting the conversation for anyone who is looking at their seder plate and feeling a bit lost.
It's about communal resilience. The donkey doesn't walk alone, he's part of a caravan. The sloth doesn't. Well, okay, sloths are pretty solitary, but they are part of an ecosystem that works. We are part of an ecosystem of memory. When one of us is too tired to carry the pack, the others lean in.
I'll lean in, Herman, but only if there's a comfortable pillow involved. But you're right. This Passover, let the order carry you. If you can't find the words, use the ones that have been used for centuries. If you can't find the hope, just eat the sherazet and wait for the sweetness to kick in. It's a biology of belief.
I think we should also talk about the second-order effects of this kind of resilience. When we show up for the Seder despite the fear, what does that do to the people around us? What does it do to our kids, like little Ezra? It shows them that our identity isn't defined by the people who hate us. It's defined by the stories we tell each other.
That is the ultimate flex, as the kids say. You can try to ruin our year, but you can't stop us from having dinner and singing about freedom. It's an incredibly stubborn way to live. And as a donkey, you should appreciate that more than anyone. Stubbornness is a virtue when it's applied to survival.
It is the only way forward. We have to be more stubborn than the circumstances. The Exodus wasn't just a physical journey, it was a psychological one. They had to stop thinking like slaves before they could live like free people. That transition takes time. It takes 40 years of slow, deliberate change.
So, if you are feeling like you haven't solved your anxiety by the time you hit the Hallel songs at the end of the night, that's okay. You're just in year 7 of your 40-year trek. You're doing fine. Just keep walking. Or, in my case, just keep hanging on to the branch.
I mean, indeed. The journey is the point. The fact that we are still on the journey after all this time is the miracle. We don't need the sea to split every Tuesday. We just need to keep moving toward the next year in Jerusalem.
I think that's a perfect place to start wrapping this up. We've covered the metabolic survival of the sloth, the logistical hope of the donkey, and we've got a speech ready to go. What is the one thing you want people to take to their table tomorrow night, Herman?
I want them to realize that the Seder isn't a performance. It's a practice. You don't have to feel liberated to do the Seder. You do the Seder so that eventually you might remember what liberation feels like. Sit in the discomfort. Let the questions be hard, and remember that the order was built specifically for times like these. It's a map for the dark.
And for me, I'd say be the sloth. Conserve your energy for the people at the table. Turn off the phone, ignore the global roar for a few hours, and just be present in the narrow place with your loved ones. That small circle of light is where the real resistance happens.
Well said, brother. This has been a heavy one, but I feel a lot better heading into tomorrow now.
Me too. Even if I do have to spend 4 hours grating horseradish later. The things we do for tradition.
It's worth every tear, Corn. Big thanks to our producer Hilbert Flumingtop for keeping us on track today.
And a huge thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this whole operation. We couldn't do this without the tech behind the scenes.
This has been My Weird Prompts. If you found this helpful, or if you're going to use Corn speech, we'd love to hear about it. Find us at myweirdprompts.com for all the ways to subscribe and follow the show.
And if you're on Telegram, search for My Weird Prompts to get notified when we drop new episodes. We're there, waiting for you, probably moving very slowly.
Happy Passover, everyone. May your Seder be meaningful, and may we all find a bit of that slow liberation this year.
Next year in Jerusalem, or at least, next year in a world that's a little bit quieter. Good night, Herman.
Good night, Corn.
This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash, text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, my weird prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts.